It's a great honor to be here, and I'm very grateful to all of my Chinese colleagues and to the Publishing House of Electronics Industry for arranging this event. It has been many months since I have been in China, and I miss my colleagues and my students and the country very much. Looking forward to returning. So I have had the opportunity to teach Clear and Simple is the Truth in China a couple of times, twice. This is the original, and now we have the translation, and we will be talking about these today.
非常开心今天受邀来到古典风格的新书发布会，非常感谢开智学堂杨志平老师还有电子工业出版社给我这次机会。已经有好几个月不在中国了，我非常想念我在中国的同事还有朋友，并且我在中国曾经教过几位同学古典风格。今天很开心能够有机会为这本书做一下宣传。
My friendly and intelligent translator, it is so wonderful to be with you in this room with a fire behind us.
非常感谢幕后工作人员的辛苦努力，辛苦付出。
So everyone wants to know how to speak, and everyone wants to know how to write. But when we say that we would like to learn how to speak or how to write, we don't mean just that we want verbal skills, because everyone in the audience already knows how to speak and how to write. They probably have since they were 15 years old.
当我们说到讲话或是写作，我们指的并不单单是说话的技巧，因为大家大概从15岁就已经知道如何说话、如何写作了。
When we say we would like to learn how to speak or how to write, what we mean is that we would like to do it in a way that is effective. We would like to do it well.
当我们说如何说话、如何写作时，我们希望这种交流能够是高效的。
But it is impossible to learn how to speak or write well because speaking and writing are vast. They are everywhere in human behavior.
但是如果说你要学会如何说话，其实是非常难的，因为这是一项非常浩大的工程。我们随时随地生活中都在说话。
Writing is not just one thing, but it is possible to recognize and study and learn how to write a particular style.
虽然说技巧难以学，但是我们完全有能力识别并且学习如何使用一种风格。
Everything a human being does is done in a style. So, for example, I am speaking now in accent. This is sometimes called a Hollywood accent because it is a particular kind of English.
我们人类的任何行为都会包含一种风格，比如说我现在在讲话，我的口音就被称为好莱坞式口音，因为这是一种完全可以识别的风格。
Most people do not recognize that they have a style of speaking or that they have an accent of style of speaking because we don't notice the styles that we learned as young children.
很多人没有意识到，其实我们无论是说话还是做事，都存在一种独特的风格，因为我们从小就被教了怎么说话、怎么做事，以至于我们自己意识不到。
But if you think of it, you actually already know many different styles of speaking and writing. You speak one way to your grandmother, and another way to your professor, and another way to friends, and another way to foreigners from America.
但其实我们已经掌握了很多种风格，比如说和你的奶奶说话是一种风格，跟教授说话又是一种风格，跟你的同事朋友说话又是另一种风格。
When we use only the styles that we learned in our communities or in our families, then we are trapped. We can't acquire more styles. We can't recognize that styles are something that one can study and learn.
我们在自己身处的社会或者说国家地区中学到了某一种风格，但自己很可能意识不到，因为我们不知道风格其实是可以学习的，可以改变的。
But with a little bit of work, with a little bit of cognitive science, one can learn to recognize a style, to study it, to figure out how it works, and therefore to learn how to perform that style oneself. And this expands our knowledge and our abilities.
只要掌握一点认知科学的原理，我们就可以对某一种风格加以识别，并且学会某一种风格，这样也可以拓展我们知识的边界。
Some styles of writing, some styles of speaking are very personal and attached to the individual. Great poets, for example, sometimes have a very personal style. And although we could learn that personal style and use it, it would sound just like imitation. It would sound as if we were trying to imitate that great poet or that great philosopher.
有许多风格是非常个人的，比如说有一些伟大的诗人，他们都有自己独特的风格，很多人可能会去模仿他们。
But there are some styles of writing that are general in the sense that they can be used for anything and by anybody.
但是有的风格是可以，是人人都可以用的，它是一种通用的风格。
These general styles are what this book teaches. This book teaches how to recognize a style, including a style that you do not yet master, and how to learn it so that you can master it.
这本古典风格讲的就是这样一些通用的风格，它会告诉我们，哪些风格是我们可以掌握、学习的，哪些风格是我们最好不要用的。
Francis Noel Thomas, my co-author, and I analyze many of these styles in this book, many of these general styles that you can learn. They include practical style, plain style, romantic style, oracular style, rhetorical style, and many others.
我的同事弗朗西斯诺尔·托马斯跟我已经分析过非常多的风格，然后在《古典风格》这本书中列举了几种最通用的风格，大家都可以来学习，比如说平实风格、实用风格、浪漫风格、晦涩风格等等。
But our main example is classic style.
但是我们最主要讲的就是古典风格。
And there are many reasons that we choose this as the main style for us to analyze.
我们有很多理由成为我们选择古典风格的原因。
One of the main reasons is it is a very effective, very powerful, very useful style that has a tradition going back thousands of years.
第一个原因就是这些风格，古典风格，它有几千年的历史，并且它非常的高效实用。
Another reason to choose classic style to study is that it is easy for students to see that it is a style. And the reason it is easy to see it is that it is not usually taught in schools. It is in the culture and it is used widely and very effectively, but it's not usually the one taught in schools. So students in America or in China can see that is his style, and this helps them get the concept that there are styles that one can learn.
另一个原因呢，就是古典风格，不论是在中国还是在美国，我们都随处可以见到，就是它应用非常的广泛，但是学校却并没有教如何使用古典风格，所以这样一来，学生们就特别容易辨别古典风格，也可以知道其实这个风格是可以学会的。
In France, by contrast, classic style is the style that is taught in schools. So students have a hard time seeing that it is a distinctive style. To them, it looks just like the style that they have learned for 10, 15 years. It just looks to them like good style. Why would anyone want to write in another style? So when we teach this in France, our main example is not classic style. It's a different style so that the students can recognize what is going on.
相反，在法国，因为学生们在学校里学的就是古典风格，所以他们很难想象，如果有一种好的写作风格不是古典风格，那会是什么呢？对他们来说也很难辨认，这其实只是一种风格。
Any general style, any of the general styles we treat in this book, is defined by the elements of style. And the elements of style is not a long list. A style is defined intellectually, not by verbal elements. It is defined by a coherent set of answers to a coherent set of questions.
在这本书中，我们所列举的这一些通用风格是如何定义的呢？这里有一连串的标准，就是如何回答这些问题，决定了什么一种风格是怎样的。
And these questions are very interesting, but they are not hard to understand once you think of them.
这个问题非常有趣，但是可能有点难，就是刚开始理解可能会有一点困难。
So the first question is, what can a human being know? The style takes a stand. In some styles, there are many things that are deep mysteries. In some styles, there are many things that a human being will never understand. In classic style, the assumption is that we can know, that we can understand.
第一个问题就是人类到底能知道多少？人类的认知范围。对于某些风格来说，有些事情是非常神秘，人类不可能会知道。但是对于古典风格来说，人类是完全可以知道真相的。
A second question is, what can be put into words? In some styles, like Romantic style, the view is that language will always be inadequate. It will never quite capture what we know. But in Classic style, language is adequate.
第二个问题就是哪些可以表达成语言呢？对于古典风格来说，我们只要知道就可以表达成语言。但是，比如说对浪漫风格来说，整篇看下来可能很难捕捉它的意思。
Another element of style, another question is, what is the relationship between language and thought? Can they fit? Can they match? Can they work together?
第三个问题是语言和思想的关系，语言能否贴近思想？
Another is, whom is the speaker addressing and why?
第四个问题是，作者他是谁？为什么要发表这样的演说？为什么要这样说话？
What is the implied relationship between the writer and the reader? So, for example, who has the power? What does the writer think of the mind of the reader?
最后一个问题是，读者跟作者之间是怎样的关系？谁高高在上？谁掌握着主动权？作者是如何看待读者？
And there are other questions that are the element of style, but in any given style, there will be positions assigned to truth, language, the writer, and the reader.
当然还有一些其他的要素，但是在这里我们只列举这5种要素，那就是真相、呈现、场景、语言与思想，还有读者跟作者的关系。
And to recognize a style, a coherent style, is to recognize the answers to these questions in the style. Classic style has a set of coherent answers to these questions, and that's what I'm going to talk about next.
要识别某一种风格，就要先回答这种风格对以上这几个问题采取的立场。古典风格自然有它的一套回答，接下来我将详细说明。
So perhaps the most basic element of style in classic style is the position assigned to truth.
对于古典风格来说，最基本的就是真相。
In classic style, the writer takes the stand, doesn't talk about it, of course, but takes the position that it is possible for a human being to think through something and to come to conclusions that can be shared with other people.
在古典风格中，作者认为作者持这样一种立场：事先作者进行一番思考，然后认为他的思考是可以传达给观众、传达给读者的。
And that if it is properly shared, if these conclusions are properly shared, then the reader will recognize them, will recognize the truth. It doesn't matter who the person is in classic style. Might be a peasant, might be anybody. If truth is presented appropriately, classic style takes the stand that it will be recognized.
古典风格还持这样一种立场：一旦作者将这个结论、真相展现出来、说出来，那么无论读者是谁，是农民老伯还是知识分子，都可以读懂。
So truth can be known.
所以说，在古典风格中，真相是可知的。
And truth is not contingent. It does not depend upon point of view or angle of vision. If there is a true conclusion that someone has reached and it is presented to the reader, then the reader will recognize it.
就是说，真相它存在，只要你把它展现出来，读者看到就会认出，就会明白。
Now, of course, in the real situation, all of these things might be false. A style makes a complete difference between the real situation and the assumed scene of the writing.
但是在真实的情况中，可能事情就会相反，不是说古典风格完全适合于每一种，古典风格和真实的场景可能还有所区别。
So, for example, Thucydides in the Peloponnesian War has certain things to say about the nature of human politics and the nature of people and about the nature of democracy.
比如说，真实情况中，当我们谈到政治、嗯谈到民主这些事情，
Now, this might be false, but Thucydides does not worry about it. He respects the reader. He just assumes that the reader will see the things about democracy and the mob that he wants to present.
对于古典风格来说，一旦作者展示了真相是怎样的，无论他展示的是民主还是政治，读者都可以看到，都可以认出真相，并且理解。
This makes classic style a very congenial, respectful, collusive style. What do I mean by collusion? Well, right now, I and my wonderful translator are colluding. I say things, she recognizes them, and she translates. And I am taking the style that, of course, she will recognize what I am saying. And of course, she will translate them appropriately. So it is respectful, it is informal, it is congenial, it is collusive. So classic style is an elite style, but it's actually very relaxing. There's not a tension between the writer and the reader.
另外，古典风格它不是适用于非常正式的场合，比如说现在我说一些话，然后像我的译者就会明白、认出我在说什么，然后传达给大家。
So why does the classic stylist speak? Now, in reality, the person writing might have many different motives. The writer might want to persuade you of something. The writer might want to sell you something. The writer might want to make you fear. The writer might want your love. There are many different real motives that a writer can have.
写作者他可以有非常多的动机，比如说他写一篇东西，可能是要向你销售什么，或者是要说服你，或者是要让你感到恐惧。总之，他们都有自己的动机，这些动机各不相同。
But in classic style, the assumption is made, the stance is made that the motive is truth.
但是在古典风格中，我们存在这样一种假设：动机就是真相。
The classic writer in the style does not want anything out of the reader. In the style, is not trying to push the reader or force the reader or beg the reader or anything like that. Instead, the classic writer wants to present something that is true to the reader, who has a mind just like the classic writers and also wants to recognize truth. That is the motive in the style of classic style.
在古典风格中，作者写作不是为了展示什么、说服什么，而仅仅是为了呈现真相。作者不怀揣其他的目的。
And since in classic style, the motive is truth, that is, the assumed motive is truth, it's part of the style to write as if prose is a window, a perfect, transparent window. The reason for the prose is to present what's behind the window. The writer wants to present truth, and prose is not what you're supposed to look at. Instead, the validity of prose, the authority of prose is that it's a good window on the truth that the writer wants to present.
在古典风格中，作者相当于是在一扇窗前向读者展示真相。这扇窗子透明，并且毫无保留地展示作者想要展示的一切。
Now, in fact, in the real scene, it's very often that people read classic style because it is so perfectly written. They are, in fact, looking at the prose. But the writer does not draw attention to the prose.
在实际情况中，我们经常看到，会发现有古典风格也是这个样子。但是古典风格的作者并不是想要抓取读者的注意。
Exactly. There are many styles, or oratorical style, for example, that in the style draw attention to the prose. The writer is essentially trying to say, look, I'm a great writer, and don't you recognize that? There are many poets, for example, where the writing is supposed to be what you notice. But in classic style, although of course you may notice the writer is always taking the stand that what you're supposed to be paying attention to, and certainly what the writer is paying it to, is the truth being presented. And you could write just as well as the writer. It is not a distinction that separates the writer and the reader. On the contrary, the writer trusts the reader. The reader is just as good as the writer.
在古典风格中，读者与作者是平等的，没有谁更聪明。只要作者完美的展示了他想要展示的真相，读者就完全能够识别。
And since the reader is just as good as the writer and could take the next turn, classic style takes the pose that writing is not any work. It just comes out that way. The prose is perfect. Prose is a window. But the writer's mind is sufficiently trained that the writing comes out that way. Classic style hides all the work of writing.
在古典风格中，作者首先需要有一定的思想训练，但是他在智力上与读者是平等的。 作者先有思想，然后付诸语言，把真相呈现给读者。
We contrast this with many other styles. There are many general styles where the writer shows you the work that the writer is doing. The writer is putting in fabulous energy and coming up with just the right phrase. That's not a classic style. In classic style, prose is a window. The reader and the writer are competent.
在古典风格中，你不会看到作者费了多少的功夫，花了多少的心力才写出这篇文章。你能看到的文章只是一扇展现真相的窗户。
So, the writer thinks, pardon me, the writer thinks something through, comes to a conclusion, and then wants to present it to you, the reader. Thinking precedes writing. In the style, the writer is not using writing in order to think. First comes the thought, then comes the presentation.
在古典风格中，思想先于表达，作者先经过一番思考，然后得出了一个结论，最后才写成文章展示给读者，并不是边写边思考。
And so the model scene of classic style is one person speaking to another. I do not mean rambling. Oh, hi, I don't know, I'm just here. I am so happy to see you. Gee, how are your children? Oh my, I'm glad to hear that your children. It's not that kind of making chit chat, of making it up as you go along. That's not what I mean.
古典风格中的场景是一个人说话，一个人听，两个人在交谈。但我这里说的说话，并不是日常随便见了面打打招呼，询问一下，寒暄一下，不是这样的。
Instead, in the style, the writer recognizes something that is worth presenting and presents it appropriately to the reader. For example, look, Lucy, that blackbird in the tree has red stripes on its wings.
比如说，这里是作者要先看到一些值得展示给读者的东西，然后把它们写出来，引起读者的注意。比方说，看星星，那棵树上有一只黑色的鸟，它的翅膀上有红色的条纹。
So you see what happens in that example. Someone recognizes a truth. Doesn't mean a great philosophical truth necessarily, but recognizes something that the reader will recognize if the writer can just point it out, show the reader where to look. Then the reader will see that there's a blackbird with red stripes on its wings.
在这里，首先作者需要看到一些东西，并不是说一定要看出什么高深的哲学道理，只要是一个能被展示的真相就可以。比如说像那只鸟身上的红色条纹，然后他再指给读者，读者就能看到并且认出。
The model is one person speaking to another. The pretense of classic style is that the writing comes out spontaneously, and it is motivated by the desire to present truth to the reader.
古典风格的 经典模式是一个人对另一个人说话，也就是说，作者先观察到了一些东西，然后受这种要展示真相的动力驱使，将它展示给读者。
And in the model scene of one person speaking to another, we only have right now. So the speaker, the writer, the classic writer, does not spend much time forcing the reader to go back and forward, does not say, as we saw 3 chapters ago, or in a couple of chapters, we will be talking about this and that and the other. That's meta discourse. But instead, the model scene is more like this event with my wonderful translator. We just have right now, and I am speaking. And that is the moment when you will understand. You cannot look ahead to the end of this talk. You cannot rewind this talk to go back to the beginning. In the model scene of classic style, one person is speaking to another now.
在古典风格的场景中，也就是古典联合注意场景中，是一个人对另一个人说话。这件事情是发生在现在的，并不是要读者跳回到之前去看前面的话，或者跳到最后，它就是发生在当下的。
So I'm almost finished, and I'll give you a little contrast. Let me say that there are many different styles, many different general styles. And it's not that one of them is good and others are bad. No, all of these styles are good for certain kinds of things. And this book teaches you how to recognize styles, how to learn them, and how to choose which one will work in this situation.
讲到这里，我还要再提一下，这本书里说到了很多其他风格。我们并不是说只有古典风格是好的，其他风格都不好。每种风格都有它自己的优点，有自己适用的场合。我们需要区别、认出，并且学会驾驭不同的风格。
So, for example, in this presentation, I could have chosen a very different style. I could have chosen practical style.
比方说，在这场演讲中，我完全可以用另一种风格来演说。比如说，我可以用实用风格。
In classic style, I'm simply assuming that you are my equal. You are competent. And the reason I am presenting this to you is because classic style is interesting truth. And you want to know about it. We have the same kind of mind. And we don't have any job to do. We are just interested in knowledge. We are interested in truth. We are interested in the blackbird having red stripes on its wings.
比如说，当我用古典风格进行演讲，在我眼中，所有的观众跟我都是一样平等的，我们一样聪明，我们都有一颗求知好奇的心，我们都对真相、对古典风格感兴趣，而这完全与工作是毫无关系。
So I could have presented in this talk classic style in practical style. And the way I would have done that is to say, listen, you will have many jobs in the world, and you must learn to write in practical style if you are going to be able to accomplish these jobs. You will need to be able to tell your employees what to do in a way such that they will do it. And my job here is to teach you practical style or teach you classic style. So I know it's hard. You're going to have to do a lot of work, but get ready. Let's go. You are my student. You need to learn to do what I tell you to do. Here we go. That's practical style, not classic at all.
刚刚我给大家演示了一下，如果我用实用风格，就会变成这样。大家都听着，我们现在有很多工作要做。首先，你们都得学会实用风格，而我的任务、我的工作就是把你们全部教会。这跟古典风格是完全不同的。
So here is my last comment. The book has an essay about styles and what the print elements of style are and how to recognize a style and what the elements are of various styles, especially classic style. It has a second chapter called The Museum, where we give you examples of writing and then we analyze their style. It's like going to a museum and seeing a painting, and then there's a little explanation of what's going on.
在古典风格这本书中，在第一部分我介绍了古典风格的原理，然后在第二部分是古典风格博览，这里我举了很多例子，并且对这些例子加以分析，就好像大家走进一个博物馆来看展一样，不同的风格有不同的例子。
And then there's a third chapter called The Studio. And the studio is where we take you through various exercises one by one, and you do the exercises. And at the end of that, you command classic style and the ability to analyze styles.
第三部分就是古典风格工作室，这一部分我列举了很多练习，大家可以一个一个的做，做完这些练习之后，我相信你就能够掌握古典风格，也就知道如何辨别每种风格了。
And the last section is further readings in classic style. If you want to know more about classic style, these are further things one could read. And for the future, one of my projects is to produce a small book on classic style in Chinese. I do not read or write Chinese, but I'm very interested in Chinese, and I have many friends and colleagues in China. And I would like to participate in a group of authors that would produce a small little book on classic style as it has been used in the long and wonderful traditions in China, so that people who have read this book or this book can then go and read the second little book with examples of classic style in Chinese. Thank you very much for your attention.
最后附录部分我还列举了一些延伸阅读，如果大家前面没有读够，可以在延伸阅读部分看一些推荐书单。另外呢，我还正在准备做一个项目，就是我想出一本小书，这本小书专门用来介绍古典风格在中文中的应用。我有很多中国朋友，我对汉语也非常感兴趣。虽然我自己不会用汉语写，但是我想集结几位作家来帮我一起出版这本小书。非常感谢大家。